You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Well, there's no shock anymore like there was back in the 80s when gas was starting to climb up to that $1 a gallon. Can you imagine? It was almost like we were towing a line trying to hold it from happening. But then all of a sudden, as it got past the dollar, things weren't so bad. As it began to creep up to $2 a gallon, well, it didn't seem to really bother us too much anymore. But now we're starting to face the possibility that perhaps by the end of this summer, or perhaps even sooner, that in America that we will certainly see gas prices at $5 and more. So alas, what is one to do? Well, you can certainly just let your car sit in the driveway and maybe get yourself a donkey or a horse. Perhaps have your dog pull you on piggyback. Or you can find ways that you can make your gas go a little bit further where you can stretch it out. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is our guest, Wayne Gerdes, and he terms himself a Highmiler. At least that's a term that he coined. And he's going to be talking with us today about what we can do to stretch our gas and our gasoline dollars. He is the winner of the Hybrid Fest, which is basically a competition in which you try to get your car to go as many miles per gallon as you possibly can. So it'll be real interesting to find out what kind of innovative ways he's found to help us save money and to stretch our gasoline dollars. And I'd like to welcome Wayne Gerdes to the Beyond 50 radio program. Wayne, thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Daniel.
So tell us, were you one of those kind of kids that like to sit in the basement or in the garage and just tinker with things? Is that how this all started for you, or what was going on there?
Well, actually, no. My trigger came when the towers came down the day after 9/11. I decided I'm going to make a difference on my own 2 feet instead of worrying about or wondering if somebody else is going to come up with a solution. So in my world, it's what could I do to lower my consumption, because the United States is 60% imports right now for our daily consumption needs for driving our cars and trucks back and forth to work, and there's definitely a way, and you definitely have a choice.
I know certainly over many programs that I've done over the last 7 to 8 years, that has come up several different ways and several different times about American consumption, and in fact I was quite alarmed when I heard from an anthropologist that the United States consumes more than 1/5 of the world's natural resources, and I thought to myself, I think maybe it's time that we started changing our habits, and certainly driving is one of those. As you take a look at, for instance, the types of automobiles that are allowed to be sold, your big SUVs, your giant trucks that consume phenomenal amounts of fuel, you think to yourself, how come this is being allowed when we're screaming the other message to be more conservative, to pull back and not to consume so much?
Well, you've done a little bit of homework there, and yeah, we're about our small country in the bigger scheme of things. It consumes almost 25% of the natural resources of the world. And even if we do start conserving now, it may not be fast enough to run into issues like peak oil and things like that. But again, everybody has a choice, no matter what they own and drive, to lower that fuel consumption. And by all means, the next vehicle that you choose to purchase or to own through a lease or buying used, make it more fuel efficient than whatever you currently drive, and that'll only help.
Now, here's the thing I'd like to ask, too, Wayne, since you've really been in the mix as far as getting a car to be a lot more efficient, finding innovative ways out there that you can accessorize your car in such a way that will increase your gas mileage. I guess, well, in the end, it's really the consumer who's responsible in many ways for what a company produces, but why companies were allowed to produce basically energy-guzzling hogs, such as your sports utility vehicles and your large trucks, and then literally walk away and say, well, that's what the consumers wanted. You know, we're not responsible for that. But it seems that accountability should really come into play, especially when it comes to manufacturing and consumerism.
Well, you've probably heard of European diesels, and I just give you an example of Ford Motor Company. They've got 5 vehicles that are capable of 50 miles per gallon or more highway in the United Kingdom alone. And yet here in the United States, they offer nothing. Even the Ford Escape Hybrid at 30 miles per gallon, 32 combined, is not even close to what they offer in Europe, and here we are today. Now, we've got steep emissions on diesel, and that's what I was talking about for Europe. Over here in the United States, because of the emission concerns and the laws, and rightfully so, we need to reduce our smog-forming emissions, and that's basically NOx and particulate coming out of the vehicle's tailpipes. We're stuck with gasoline. So that means we're stuck with Toyota Priuses. But again, the European continent and the Asians, they do have a lot more choices for fuel efficiency, but it is the consumer choice in the United States that drove the big three, and including Toyota and Honda. All of them offer some big equipment that we drive daily that offers almost nil fuel economy compared to what they offer in other areas of the world. And it's a choice that they think Americans want, and it's unfortunately catching everybody at a bad time with gasoline pushing into the $4 range recently.
Well, just as I said earlier, it's also the responsibility of the consumer to say, well, why do you need this particular vehicle, for instance, a Hummer? As I just recently heard that Wisconsin was shutting down at least one of their trucking plants, or a couple, because these were the manufacturers that were making these Hummers, these big, giant, guzzling things that weren't made to just drive on the road, but to basically mow down forests to get you to where you want to go. And so you see that when somebody buys that, they're taking the responsibility into their own hands, too, and then they turn around and they complain about gas prices. It's like, use your head.
Daniel, the Hummer probably the poster child for anti-fuel economy, and it definitely raises a spirit that we haven't seen before on the fuel efficiency forums, and clean m.p.g in particular. However, we do have to look back at what's the most profitable vehicle that GM makes, and it probably is the Hummer for what if you were in business, are you going to offer the Subway sandwich, or are you going to offer the Big Mac loaded with all the mayonnaise and everything else? If one gives you more profit potential or puts more money in your pocket, you're a businessman. You're going to take what the consumer will purchase for max profit. And unfortunately, it led GM, Ford, and Chrysler down a bad choice or a bad path. And again, Honda and Toyota. I'm just using examples.
Right.
They follow the same path. I mean, they have the Ridgeline, the Pilot for Honda. Toyota is loaded with gas guzzlers, and the Sequoia and 4Runner, but they also offer you another side of that, and like maybe a Civic Hybrid or a Prius, whereas the United States manufacturers, they don't have anything along those lines, and they're in trouble right now. They are in deep trouble.
Now, I think what's interesting, too, is everybody, or at least most people, have heard about the film Who Killed the Electric Car. This came out around the same time as Al Gore's big movie on the inconvenient truth about global warming. And it's funny because these conversations really had been happening years ago. We're talking about the late 60s, even in the early 70s, about environmentalism and about consumption at the same time. But then it's almost like somebody came in and hit a pause button and said, well, let's just not worry about that and just continue forward with the way things are. So now we've gotten ourselves to, as what Stephen Hawking would call, an event horizon, where we're about to be sucked into the black hole with almost no hope. And the question simply is, why did we keep moving in a direction that we knew was almost self-destructive? Was it just purely for profits, or was it from a desire from consumers? What was it that kept them moving forward blindly, do you think?
It was $10 an oil barrel is what did that.
Okay.
It definitely took the wind out of the sails of any conservation. But we're butting up against the stops of production and supply versus demand. And it's not just our demand, but worldwide. And it doesn't matter if the oil is pumped out of Oklahoma or if it's pumped out of Saudi Arabia. It's a big pool. And here we are sitting on the Green River Range of, you can call it oil shale. We have enough to supply ourselves for the next 150 years. However, it's not going to be easy to get out, and there's going to be a lot of emissions to get it out. Whenever you start looking at the overall demand and supply in the entire country or the entire planet, we're running out. We've consumed so fast, and we are consuming so fast today that there's going to be future trouble. Now, I want to bring a point about gasoline being an energy carrier, because we all heard about hydrogen, but gasoline itself, the amount of energy that's needed to pump it out from, let's say, the deep caverns of underneath the Gulf of Mexico, they're going down 20,000 feet, another 10,000 in the bedrock, pump it back into a refinery. You got to crack it, you got to refine it, pump it back into somebody's truck somewhere or in a pipeline to a distribution facility and then into the tank. That amount of energy is now approaching what a battery electric vehicle would use directly. So the gallon of gasoline is turning into an energy carrier itself. And that brings up, a whole bed of reasons why we should be getting off the oil kick. However, that's not going to stop Joe and Susie Q. Public from going out and buy an SUV today, and some still are doing it. Now, if it is a choice of theirs, but if they do that, at least they should know there's repercussions around the world for that particular choice and purchase, and that if it gets bad enough, they have a choice to drive that vehicle a lot more efficiently than the 14 miles per gallon they're probably going to get out of the Sequoia if that's what they were going to use.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting. I have a guest here on the program who typed in a question, which is, what if there were a property tax on autos that don't get at least a minimum of 30 miles per gallon? And I was just thinking, as you were talking about Susie and John Q. having that choice to go ahead, well, we're going to buy this gas guzzler. We got the money to put gas into it. We're going to be irresponsible anyway, knowingly, because we just love this vehicle and the way we look in it. And you can say, well, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll let you buy that, but because you're going to be consuming more than anybody else in your neighborhood, we're going to go ahead and tax you for that. That'd be kind of an interesting solution, I would think.
Well, an interesting solution or not, they are already being taxed in some form. $4 gasoline in a 15-mile-per-gallon vehicle is a tax upon itself, even though some of that revenue doesn't come back to the government. You can say even an oil company or a transport company that is involved in the oil supply and gasoline supply line, there's income taxes that come from that. And as the price goes up, there's money going back in the government for that. And somebody that owns a gas guzzler at $4, they're paying quite a bit of money out. And not all that money is going to Saudi and Venezuela and Canada. Some of that is getting pushed back into the government coffers through taxes of ExxonMobil and Chevron, Conoco. So there is, it is a tax. It's just in a different form. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a tax on that, and if you look at congestion charges in Europe and how maybe even New York is going to talk about driving into the Manhattan, that's going to cost you every day, there's some hefty fees involved in that. I don't know if we want to go there, but I certainly would like to see better public transport around the country to move us from point A to point B without relying on the automobile so much. But we have to look at the present infrastructure, and it's going to be tough.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, no easy solutions when you're finding yourself at, the midnight hour trying to come up with solutions that you spent all day getting yourself in trouble with, that's for sure. We're talking with Wayne Gerdes, the Highmiler, and we're talking today about fuel efficiency, how we can stretch our dollar as well as our gas to ultimate miles per gallon. Now, you were the winner of the Hybrid Fest. Tell us about what this particular competition is and the kind of people that come into this and what the goal is.
Well, the goal at an event like that is to promote hybrid vehicle ownership. And when we talk about hybrid owner vehicle, I even own 3 non-hybrids myself. And I used to own a hybrid, and I wish I did now, in fact. But that being the case, if we can show that owning a hybrid vehicle, you can get over 100 miles per gallon, is that going to make more of a dent in somebody's mindset for the next vehicle purchase than if I tell them in my Ford Ranger pickup truck I got 65 miles per gallon going back and forth to Milwaukee from here in Chicago the other day?
Wow, 65 miles in a Ford Ranger. That's impressive.
Yeah. So that's what it's all about, is if you pick the high-mileage vehicles to begin with, you can take them to outstanding fuel economy afterwards. And at the first Fuel Economy Challenge at Hybrid Fest 2006, I drove a Honda Insight, borrowed one from a friend, and she allowed 181 miles per gallon for the 21-mile round-trip commute for the challenge through Madison. Any vehicle can be pushed to a limit, way, way above their EPA ratings if you know what you're doing. And then there's basic techniques all the way to highly advanced techniques. The advanced ones, we'd prefer that everybody uses them or practice, learn, and then implement them in desolate roadways till they're second nature. It's just like looking down at your looking down at your speedometer. You kind of know, okay, it's 55 miles an hour, you're going 55. But you just take a quick glance down. You know the accelerator, you know the brake, you know what they do. Well, all the advanced techniques, some of them use more. Some might use your stick shift. Some might use your transmission selector in an automatic. Some might use the key even. And even just using the basic setup and basic techniques, which all it is a change in mindset, 50% above the EPA is kind of a standard number that I put out because that's what's capable of any vehicle, just using the basics. Using the advanced, that's where you get up to 100% or over. Now, these aren't magic elixirs. There's nothing you do to your car except for fill up oil with the proper type, put more air in your tires, put a scan gauge if you're into the vehicle, if it is not already equipped with a fuel consumption display. Just basic things. And then the way that you drive, let's anticipate a little bit. Imagine if your brakes were diminished. How would that change the way you drive today? Not saying you're going to drive with diminished brakes, but it will puts you into a mindset that, hey, I've got to be a little bit more cautious. I got to be a little bit more aware of what I'm doing. I'm not going to accelerate into a red light. I'm not going to slam the brakes on, too late. I'm going to be anticipating what's going on in front of me. By anticipating, you're not reacting, and your fuel economy will go through the roof just by doing that.
It's just, so you're saying that even just these basic techniques can increase your fuel efficiency by twice, no matter what car that you have?
Yes, and I'll just give you, the fuel economy challenges are great because you can put out some great numbers, and we had the Insight Marathon in October of 2006 to send that vehicle off because Honda doesn't make it anymore, but that vehicle is rated at a little over 50 miles per gallon on the new 08 EPA. We took it for a single tank of fuel, 2,254 miles at 164 miles per gallon.
Wow.
In a small town in Oklahoma. And again, we were pushing it right to the limits. We were out desolate roadways, obviously, but we just wanted to show people that, hey, this vehicle is capable with, under 30 miles an hour. This vehicle can do that. And when people say, well, I never travel under 30, I average 70 back and forth to work. And I said, you have to look at, if you were going 70 as an average speed, does that mean you run into your garage at 70 and then fly through the other end of the house and park your car in somebody's swimming pool next door? You have to wake them up and say, look, we got some reality here that in normal everyday traffic, there are times when you're moving 20 to 30 miles an hour. Why not take advantage of those techniques in that particular area? There's techniques for 0 to 20, 20 to 40. There's even techniques we use from 40 to 60. But just the basics. I was doing a presentation for the McDonald's Corporation just the other day, and it's a drive across Chicago. I took my Honda Accord. Nice, easy drive. It was a terrible day because of rain and wind, but she offered me 53.1 from my home to the McDonald's Corp, and on the way back I got 49.6. I didn't even use an advanced technique. I was using the basics. That's in a vehicle rated at 24 miles per gallon combined on the new 08 EPA.
Now, you were talking
available to everyone.
Yeah, you were talking about basic techniques, and some of the ones that you've covered is don't quickly accelerate or brake heavily. A lot of people tend to do that, especially as they run late for work or late to an appointment by procrastinating. There's a mindset change you'd have right there. Quit procrastinating so much and start paying attention to what you're doing there.
Yes.
But then the other thing too is that you give other ones as well as to how people can to actually increase their gas mileage. Now, one of these here I'm curious about is idle excessively. What does that mean exactly?
Okay, and this one, it bothers me a lot because we got a Walmart about a block and maybe a half mile from me. And I'll go in there to pick something up, and you see in the front, and it doesn't matter if it's the middle of summer, middle of winter, spring, fall, there's always somebody up front idling away, waiting for somebody to come out. And sometimes I just knock on the window and say, hey, could you shut it down because you're causing a lot of emissions here that you're not going anywhere. Why do you want to waste the gas?
Right.
And that's just one example. Do not idle if you don't have to. Also, another pet peeve, if you want to talk about it, is remote starters. Remote starters make the car comfortable in the winter by warming it up before you get out there. But to let a car idle for 5 minutes is probably the worst thing you can do to it, let alone your fuel economy is just shot. When you start a car in the middle of winter, let it come to idle. Within 3 to 5 seconds, you should be in drive and just gently drive away. It's the best thing for it. When you're coming up at a railroad crossing, there's a railroad going, the train's going by at the railroad crossing. Why are you idling? And this is just a cheap and easy one because think of how a hybrid vehicle operates. They shut down at those instances because there's no point in running. You should do the same with your non-hybrid. Up to a point, not every stop sign or every stoplight are you going to shut your key off. There's even more advanced techniques beyond that. But on the ones where you're going to sit there for a while, by all means shut down. And the wear and tear on a vehicle for a start every 2 to 3 miles, there's people that actually drive 2 to 3 miles and start up and stop their cars to go back and forth to work or to a local train station for a park and ride and stuff. Your vehicle's good for that. It's when you're doing it every quarter mile to half mile. You don't go into downtown Manhattan and start shutting your key off, shutting the engine off at every single time you stop because, it just isn't going to work.
Right.
But for a suburban area around the country, it certainly does.
I know, especially out here in Milwaukee, Oregon, there's a time when a train comes by, there's a difference between idling for an Amtrak and then idling for the one that goes 10 miles an hour and it's 400 miles long.
Yeah.
You can literally watch a movie with your car, and I found myself actually shutting my car down at those moments instead of sitting there and idling, knowing that train's going to be spending 5 to 10 minutes going in front of me there. So you're simply suggesting on the idling side, if you know you're going to be there for, say, more than a minute, why not shut the car off? Is that pretty much how it works? Is that kind of a rule of thumb that you can live with?
Daniel, God bless you for even mentioning it, and I'm glad that you do. The rule of thumb, most vehicles take about 7 seconds of fuel to restart. A modern fuel-injected engine will only take 7 seconds of fuel to restart. So anytime over 7 seconds at a light even, sure, consider it, but we do want to consider wear and tear on a non-hybrid. But the thing I'd like you to pay more attention to is the next time that you're going to sit at a long light. You know it's local, you know it's middle of rush hour, and it's going to be a 3-minuter. I want you to shut your car off and then put it to ignition too, so you're ready to go in case the light catches you on green and you're going to start up quick. But open your windows and listen to the vehicles around you. And all of a sudden a paradigm shift is going to hit you and say, I'm not idling, I'm shut down. Why aren't all these other cars shut down? And that's one of the important keys to driving a hybrid vehicle, is it does that automatically, and whenever those windows are down, you're listening around you, and you're like, why are all these cars idling? It's because they were designed back in the 20th century when we're in the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
And it is something that you just have to say, what are we doing when this technology is available? Why aren't all cars equipped? They're coming. Most cars are going to be equipped with this eventually. Otherwise, they're just not going to be on the road. But you do have a choice. You can shut down your vehicle within reason, and you can save that precious few ounces of fuel. I should say fraction of ounces of fuel, depending on how long the light is or the railroad crossing or the Walmart stop. But definitely consider it in some instances.
It's just really interesting to think that you can do these little things here, like you said, stopping in an area that you're going to spend a little bit of time waiting, shut the car off. Because it was funny, years ago I was told by a wise old man, if you will, that, well, it takes just to sit and idle, you'll use less gasoline than if you were to shut the car off and start it. But you're saying in this day and age that's not true. That's
true. The old carbureted vehicles, 30 seconds to a minute of fuel, that was plausible because they just shoved it in and let it fly. But today's modern-day fuel-injected engines, they just don't consume fuel like that, nor do they start like that. So we're in a different era, definitely, and it is something to consider. Now, there's, again, basic setup. Bring your tires to max sidewall. You're going to get better longevity, better handling, even shorter braking distances, much better fuel economy, negative, higher noise, vibration, and harshness. And with that, you have to say, what is it worth? And for somebody that may not believe me, they can go to, let's say, officer.com, do a search on tire pressure, and read the article there. It's a great one. And it just tells you what improvements there are just from a fuel economy standpoint, a handling standpoint, longevity of the tire standpoint, just from increasing your tires pressure. Mm-hmm. The door stuff, that's great for a comfortable ride. But if you take it to max sidewall, you're going to get an okay ride, but you're going to get a lot more fuel economy because that thing's just going to glide.
Well, that makes sense because you're reducing friction and gravity as well, and those are two things that can really hold a car back from getting tremendous gas mileage. I know one of the little tricks of the trade, perhaps many people may have seen this in the movie Days of Thunder, but the idea of traveling down the highway behind a semi, certainly you can be pulled by the drag of this thing, but the distance that you have to be behind this vehicle to gain that may not be suitable when you think about the idea of being safe.
Yeah, well, this is something that we have to fight all the time. And, when you're working in traffic, sometimes you get a little close. Here in the Chicago area, everybody that's been ever driven on the road is in some kind of draft. But there's 3 safety-type drafts versus the one NASCAR, which we don't recommend. The 3
the
safety
slingshot
ones,
effect, yeah.
Yeah, driving NASCAR, you're going to end up under somebody's bumper one day, and it's not. You don't want their tailpipe in your lap, but.
Right.
The 3 others, a distant draft is fine, as long as you're a second and a half or more back, which isn't that far in reality, and if anybody that's driven in traffic, they're usually within a second and a half all the time. But there's 2 others, and one, if you're following a speed limit, this is an easy one because you're in the far right lane. Hypermilers never go into the middle or left lanes, yet they're accused of it all the time. stay in the right lane in what we call a ridge ride to wake people up from behind that you're following the speed limits before they get there. But as the trucks and the cars and the sedans, the SUVs go by, they create a wake across the entire roadway. And that wake helps you because they created the low-pressure area in front of you as they go by. And it's what we call traffic side draft. It's a wonderful little tip or technique, but you get it for free just by people passing you.
Okay, so you're in this right lane, which is where you suggest we should travel, and then as cars are passing, they're actually increasing your gas mileage as you maintain a steady speed.
That's correct, and you can
see
You can see it on when you're instrumented for an instantaneous. You can see it happen all the time.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. Now, let me ask you this, because there were a lot of cars, especially, I'm going to say, as early as the late 1970s, could have been earlier, that were tagged with cruise control. So this is a way that you can control your speed, and I've used mine from time to time, but for the most part I don't. Does that help if you use cruise control in a car?
Cruise control helps those that can't control their right foot very well. I'll just give you an example, and I hate to use my wife, and thank God she's not listening, but she just cannot keep her foot steady. It's constantly moving up and down, up and down on the accelerator pedal, and it's like being in a bucking bronco type ride. And she drives, unfortunately, she owns an MDX, which is a four-wheel drive fuel-sucking pig, an FSP, but that's the vehicle she chooses, and now we're stuck with it, trust me. However, when she drives it, she gets between 16 and 20 miles per gallon going back and forth to work. When I drive it, I usually get over 30. All it is, it takes me a little, another 2 to 3 minutes to travel over an hour's distance or so. But it's because she is just too on and off, on and off, on and off, instead of letting everything go. For her, cruise control will work. But for a good driver, I have to be careful of saying good driver. She's a great driver. She's cautious. She's not aggressive. But for a driver that has control between their eyes, their brain, and their right foot, cruise control is a nemesis. And it's a nemesis because of what we call driving with load. And when we describe driving with load, you have to think of a roller coaster-like effect. There's a 35-foot elevation overpass in front of you. You're going down the highway at 60 miles an hour. Well, what most people do in cruise, as you're climbing, that thing either shifts down or dumps the injector, so you're using a lot of fuel to climb that little 35-foot elevation. On the backside, you might go into fuel cut with the engine acting as a air compressor, basically. You're not burning any fuel, but you're burning off to maintain the 55 or 60 miles an hour down the backside. Well, what you should do is act as if you're a roller coaster. And that means you never change the accelerator pedal angle. The throttle position is exactly the same coming into it, going over to the crest, and then falling down the backside. And what it does, you'll see yourself going 60 as you start to approach. You start to climb, and your speed droops a little bit. By the time you're to the top of that 35-foot overpass, you might only be going, let's say, 55, 56 miles an hour. And then you let the kinetic that you've given away for potential, let the potential change back into kinetic as you come down the backside. You'll be right back at 60 miles an hour on the backside, going flat down the highway, and your engine never felt a change.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's a simple technique, and it's another fuel saver. And you'll notice a lot of trucks, the big trucks with the big wheel, the big weight carrying over the road stuff. They have to drive like that because their vehicles can't hold speed like that unless they, get into it. But cruise control in that situation would be the wrong thing to use for most drivers that are paying attention and are instrumented with, again, a fuel consumption display. For a driver that's really not that in tune with the vehicle and their foot's moving around, just use cruise control because you're better off than, accidentally rising up to 80 miles an hour going on the highway because you weren't really paying attention.
Now, obviously, we've covered some basics here. We're talking about the opportunity that you can drive in the right lane, especially if you're on long trips on the highway, and let other cars passing you by be your gas mileage saver. The other thing is don't get in the habit of getting too close behind a vehicle because of the safety reasons for that, but you can see the obvious ones here. Now, another thing, too, it's also a matter of weight on your vehicle. Now, it was kind of interesting because a friend of mine said, I think I get better gas mileage on a full tank of gas than one that's, I'm always filling, say, and keeping it at a quarter of a tank. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense because the fact is a full tank of gas just weighs more. Well, and then you also talk about in your basics as well things such as racks, luggage racks, ski racks, these racks people put on their cars, all this weight. So what is the right weight to have on a car, a way that somebody can kind of take a look and decide, well, I don't really need this all the time. I should be taking this off. What are some rules of thumb there?
Well, let's look at the amount of weight in the vehicle to begin with. Gasoline is a little, right around 6 pounds a gallon. Mm-hmm. So the difference between having 10 gallons at 60 pounds and 15 gallons at 90, there's not that much of a difference. However, it is measurable. And I'll give you some studies. Ford, before they brought out the Ford Escape Hybrid, they were running the Ford Escape Hybrid with different or varying weights in the vehicle and running them on the test cycles. And for every 100 pounds that was added to the Ford Escape Hybrid, it would lose 1 mile per gallon. So if you're driving, let's say, a big V8, you'll lose less fuel economy than 1 mile per gallon for every 100, but you're still losing. If you're driving something like a Toyota Yaris, 100 pounds is going to affect it more than it would the Escape or the big V8. So that one you might lose up to 1.5 miles per gallon just because of the extra 100 pounds. Now, this isn't about gasoline. I'm talking about, let's say you're an avid golfer and you're going to go golfing on Saturday afternoon. Don't carry your clubs back and forth to work all week so that you're ready to go on Saturday afternoon. It's that important. And junk in the trunk is definitely something we want to reduce. But again, fuel in the tank, that one comes up every once in a while. People talk, well, you're carrying around an extra 30 pounds of fuel. The difference is that when you fuel up, to drive into a gas station and refuel and then try to get out of there, you're burning a lot of fuel that you don't need to. So in my case, I try to visit it as little as possible for obvious reasons, but I go top off and then bring it right down near the bottom. I'm on low fuel before I bring it in for a fill-up. It's just to avoid the congestion and the fuel that you're going to burn just to go into the gas station to fill up. And that alone will make up for that extra 30 pounds of fuel that you might carry around.
Okay. Yeah, because I've seen people that get in the habit, it gets down to about a quarter of a tank below the full line, and they go in and they top it off, and I'm thinking to myself, what for?
Yeah, they don't need to do that. They are carrying around extra, but just take it all the way through. If you go to a first click and then you drive it to low fuel, when that low fuel light comes on, go ahead and fill up, definitely. The vehicle is meant for that. But try not to visit the gas station because it's like going to the grocery store and not buying anything except for wasting fuel. If the less you visit that gas station, the better off you're going to be. And by going a full tank, you're fine to do that.
Now, we've been talking about a lot of the basics here, and here's a couple of others that you have that should be common sense. Four-wheel drive, you recommend that you don't use the four-wheel drive unless you need it. For instance, if you're stuck in the snow or you're out in the woods and there are areas that a two-wheel drive just won't get you around. But I do see a lot of people that like to run around in their four-wheel drive pickups, and they have it engaged. I'm thinking to myself, it's the middle of summer. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah, well, this has to go with purchasing the right vehicle to get back and forth to work. Unfortunately, most four-wheel drive vehicles are not taken off-road. That's just kind of a common thing. And when people buy a four-wheel drive vehicle, they think, well, okay, I live in Colorado, I'm going to be in snow. And all you have to do is, when you're going down the highway, look what's next to you. There's a Chevy Cobalt or a Aveo, or there might be a Ford Focus going next to you. How is he getting back and forth to work when he's got these little tires and little wheels and two-wheel drive? And I needed this big FSP to get back and forth to work with four-wheel drive. In reality, people do plow the roads reasonably well, and very little risk of you getting stuck into a situation where you couldn't get out, even with two-wheel drive. So you got to consider that, how did the guy in the Geo Metro get back and forth to work when I needed this big $45,000 four-wheel drive vehicle?
Exactly.
But if you do have the chance, if your vehicle was equipped where you can disable the rear drive, by all means do that, so that you're not running in four-wheel drive when it's absolutely not needed.
Well, what would be your opinion then? Because Subaru builds a car that is an all-wheel drive, which can be considered four-wheel drive, but then again, maybe not.
Well, there's a little hack to Subarus I've been looking into. Not that I would own a Subaru myself, because I don't think they're that fuel efficient of a company, or their vehicles are not that fuel efficient. But there is a fuse pull that will disable the rear drive on a Subi. And it's not for all years, makes and models, but for some of them. And I know some of the guys are doing that now. I still don't know all the ramifications, because sometimes a four-wheel drive vehicle like that, you disable a sensor or a system, and you can have ill effects on traction control or stability assist that might be included with that vehicle. So it's not something I recommend totally, but even on like Honda Insights, because they didn't have traction control or stability assist or anything like that, in many cases I would pull a fuse for power steering because it was an electric power steering, because I couldn't stand the lightweight feel of it. I got better handling and better feel for the car, plus I wasn't throwing away that little bit of juice to help me steer going down the road. In the case of a four-wheel drive, again, if there's a way to disable it, definitely by all means do it. And with the Subarus and all-wheel drive, if there's a way to push a button to get out, yeah, sure. But do look into the mods on that particular vehicle, because there's some discussion about it right now on my forum. And I'm like, hey, this is something to look into. As long as it doesn't disable any of the other safety features, by all means consider it. But again, do you need to buy a four-wheel drive for your next vehicle? And in 99% of the cases, no, because you're just driving back and forth to work. Somebody that's going to go off-road, well, that one's going to cost them. And again, $4 a gallon.
In more ways than driving.
Yeah, for you get that one excursion off-road, is it going to cost you for the entire year to do that? And it's a very expensive vehicle to be equipped with four-wheel driving to begin with.
I know that I'm on your website here, and there's just a lot of ways that you can help people increase their gas mileage by anywhere from 25 to 100%, pretty much no matter what the vehicle for the most part. Now, a couple of things that you talk about is the right oil to use, as well as the high BTU gasoline. Describe what those different things are there.
Sure. The best oil to use, in my opinion, and through studies, through real-world experience, is a high-quality synthetic, and I run double the interval that's recommended, per the manual, per your owner's manual, and there's a few reasons why. My Honda can accept 0W20. It's rated for 5W20 standard. I can use 0W20 in it. I use Mobil 1 for that. I get about a 2 to 2.5% increase in fuel economy because I'm using that high-quality, low kinematic viscosity synthetic oil. But an even better one, and this one is more for the environmentalists, is there's still unscrupulous oil handlers that will dump a few ounces on the ground here or there, maybe a few gallons, somehow that might get into the landfill. Oil is about the worst thing that can get into the landfill, so let's limit the chance of that getting into the landfill to begin with by extending our oil change intervals. A high-quality synthetic, and this again goes back to Europe, a lot of their vehicles over there don't get even recommended oil changes for 12 to 15,000 miles, whereas here...
Really?
Yeah, over here...
And here they recommend like 3,500 miles.
You can look in the manuals, and it's almost like, hey, that's the same engine that they're using in Europe as they are here in the United States in, a Honda Fit. But yet our oil change intervals are so much more. It's like, well, why is that? Are we driving faster than they, more stop and go? Not really. It's just a different setup for some reason. But anyways, what I'm saying is if you use a high-quality synthetic oil, and even if you wanted to go through the trouble of doing an oil analysis, and some of us have, the oil analysis at 7,500 is showing this stuff is almost brand new. Even at 10 to 12,000 miles out on a high-quality synthetic, the TBN is coming back, and it's still good for another 5,000, 10,000 miles. It's just incredible. So by doubling the change interval, you reduce the overall cost, but synthetic up front, you're going to pay $5 to $6 a quart. Hopefully you can find it on sale, versus standard dyno oil at $1.50 a quart. It's going to be a little bit more expensive up front, but if you can double the change interval, by all means. However, know that if the manufacturer warranty is involved, follow the specs. If it says 7,500, change it on 7,500, but you are throwing away good oil.
Looks like we have a caller, Ed, who's probably got a really good question or maybe a comment to make for you. Richard, you're on the Beyond 50 radio program. Did you have a question or a comment for our guest today?
Yes, I used to live in the Rockies, and years ago I bought a 1962 Ford Falcon, and I went to replace the tires when I bought it, and the tire guy told me to sipe the tires for traction, and I did. And what happened was we had a snowstorm, and I was going uphill, and brand new cars were being stuck on the side of the road, and I was climbing the hill with no problem with snow on the ground. Would you recommend a tire that's been siped?
Well, they do offer that service, but...
I would like to know, first of all, what is siping a tire exactly?
They actually make little cuts in it.
Okay.
Add little traction areas, little bars that add more traction to it. But As far as fuel economy concerned, I would say no. And the other thing about it is you sipe a new tire. If you're out 10,000 miles, let's say you bought your car in the spring, by the time it comes to winter, that sipe is gone. I mean, it's just, it's just been worn flat, nice and smooth, and so you get less advantage from that. And again, we're more talking about fuel economy in this show than I would talk about traction. But if you do get a vehicle and you want to have it siped, the vehicle tire siped, it's not a bad thing because it does add safety, but it's not going to help you in fuel economy.
Oh, okay. Well, sounds good. You betcha. Thank you, Richard, for joining us on the program. The other thing, too, you were talking about, this one just has me mesmerized about the oil change intervals. So let's say that you go to a common garage, or you go to one of these oil change places, and you get your oil change done. So you're saying that the oil that probably they have is something that you can really wait till about, say, 10,000 miles before you need another oil change again?
Well, even standard regular oil that you get from the oil change places, a Valvoline or Pennzoil or whatever, when you do an oil analysis on it, you're always changing it before it's needed. And it's unfortunate that our country is so, I guess you hate to see detail oriented, but they get inundated with this 3,000-mile oil change. And I was just at a ball game in Milwaukee where I saw Valvoline advertising the 3,000-mile oil change. That is about the worst thing that you can do for yourself, for your wallet, for our country.
Right.
It's just a waste of money, but it puts money in their pocket.
Okay.
Even standard oil lasts for, it doesn't matter if they call it a severe schedule and you're stop and go in New York City. Oils today last a lot longer than they did 10 years, 20 years ago. And to see somebody even think about a 3,000-mile oil change, it just drives me crazy nowadays.
Well, and the reason I brought that up, Wayne, is it's been real simple. I remember when I first purchased the car that I have now, believe it or not, I went way over, we're talking 12, 15,000 miles. And then when I'd start going on inclines, I noticed the car was losing its momentum, kind of almost conking out because it was a long, steep grade. And then once I had the oil change done, it was like the compression was back and I didn't have those problems again. And I thought, okay, maybe I pushed it too far. Well, the next time I had an oil change, I think I did the following one on that 3,500-mile schedule, but then I waited another almost 7,000, almost in between 7,000 and 8,000 miles before I had an oil change again, and it kept eating away at me. I've got to get the car in to get this done or I'm going to damage my engine, but you're saying, no, actually 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 miles is pretty much okay for a standard oil change. Yeah,
today's vehicles, the tolerances that are in throughout the vehicle, and if you do an oil analysis, and you certainly can, Blackstone Labs will do that for you for about $35, $40. They'll send you out a little kit, put a little bit of that used oil in there, and then they'll do analysis on it. They'll look for various wear metals and acids, and they'll come back and they'll tell you, hey, this oil is good for so many miles. And you can find this on the net. I mean, BITOG, Bob is the Oil Guy, is a great place if you want to see oil analysis because those guys are serious about oil. And you can find out that, boy, vehicles today are just so good, and the filters and oil is so good that it just lasts and lasts and lasts. Now, that doesn't mean I'm recommending going beyond your recommended, per the manual, oil change interval. However, a good high-quality synthetic with a good filter in a modern-day vehicle, 12 to 15,000 oil change with high-quality synthetic is nothing for that. The TBMs come back, and they're still good. But again, you have to follow your manufacturer's warranty while the vehicle's under there, just in case something were to come up. Say, hey, here's my oil change receipt. Bingo, you're covered. Right. But in reality,
so if you want your warranty to make out, then you want to be sure you're following the rules. I got you.
Yeah.
Well, that's very eye-opening to think. Here I was that was eating away at me, the fact that I need to change my oil, and I'm 3,000 miles, I'm 4,000 miles over, 5,000 miles over when I'm supposed to do it, and here it was actually okay.
Well, any standard dyno oil at 7,500 is good. A lot of manufacturers will still recommend a 5,000-mile oil change. Some are 7,500. Those are a lot better than they were 20, 30 years ago when it was a 3,000-mile type oil change. But again, oil is only going to add 2% extra fuel economy with a high-quality, low kinematic viscosity synthetic. It's not. It's again beyond the topic range here, and it's not something that's going to save you a lot of fuel. Your driving habits and techniques, your instrumentation, and bringing the pressure up in the tires is going to do much more for you than that oil change.
Yeah, it's still encouraging though that you can also support environmental driving by not doing so many frequent oil changes as these oil companies would have you believe. That's very encouraging. Now, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that along with that, just if you do not have a fuel consumption display in your vehicle, there is something called a scan gauge made by Linear Logic out of Arizona. And what it is, for any 1996 or newer vehicle with an OBD2 port, and that's the ones that the emission testing labs will plug in just to make sure you don't have codes and that everything's working well. But you can get fuel economy from your current vehicle on a display that you can set on your dash or somewhere where you can do a quick glance, kind of like a little speedometer.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you real-time feedback. And that particular device, it's the only device that I even recommend. I mean, there's a lot of magic elixirs and magic devices out there that are really just bunk.
Yeah, as you always tend to find.
Yeah, and at $4 a gallon, they're coming out of the woodwork again. But a fuel consumption display is nothing more than giving you the real-time data of what your car is doing. And by watching a real-time consumption of fuel, you can adjust your habits to keep that number a lot less. And I just give one example. When my wife is accelerating that MDX from a stop, it'll sit at less than 3 to 4 miles per gallon for a good 15 to 20 seconds. It is just ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with a fuel consumption display, if you're paying attention to it, and it's not like you have to mesmerize. You don't have to be mesmerized by it. You don't have to study it. Just watch it. You can stay at 5 or 7 miles per gallon for the first 5 seconds and move up to 10 miles per gallon for the next 3 to 5 seconds, and then move up to 12 miles per gallon, move up to 18. Pretty soon, you're back up at steady state cruise above 30 where you should be. But without it, you'd never know how to get to 30 miles per gallon, let alone that 3 mile per gallon hit for the first 15 to 20 seconds.
Wow.
It's ugly. It really is ugly.
Yeah.
And it happens even my Accord. If you've instrumented yourself and you hit it, it's a long time where she stays really low, and you're like, boy, this is not good.
So this particular gauge that you're talking about is a way of showing you that based on what the car is doing, this is your estimated miles per gallon?
In fact, it's a lot closer than estimated. They're usually within 3 to 4% once they're calibrated. And some,
oh, wow. And this is something you can get for any car?
Yeah, any 1996 or newer vehicle built and sold in North America. And even some Europeans and Australians, Asians, they do have the ports as well. But it's a cool, neat little device. And what I'm seeing on the forum membership, the new drivers come in, and they're starting to change their habits. But just that device alone gives you 10 to 15%, just because now you know how bad it is, and you're staying out of that area, accelerating up hills and accelerating the stoplights. It just adds a little bit of change to your driving habits, enough with that feedback that we usually see 10 to 15% increase just from that device alone.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Now, there was a question that our producer had, and what about an RV? How do you help you get great gas mileage, and what is some of the highest gas mileages you found on a common RV that you would find out on the road today?
Well, we have very few RV drivers that clean m.p.g, unfortunately, but the ones that are, most RVs, the bigger ones, they should have a nice diesel in there, and hopefully they're running tires, true truck tires that are capable of 80 pounds max sidewall. Those are probably the two best things, is just max sidewall in the tires. Maintain the speed limits. Don't try to push that big brick through the air at 90 miles an hour across Montana.
Exactly.
There's a speed limit. Speed limit's not a suggestion. It's the law.
Exactly.
Use it, and you'll be surprised that just that 5 to 10 miles per hour drop in speed will save you up to 15% in fuel just by using the speed limits. But when you do use the speed limits, use them smartly. Right-hand lane in a ridge ride. That means you're far over to the right lane as a safety device to wake people up from behind, that you want to stand out. I don't care if they think you're drunk. I don't care if they think that you're a farm implement. If you stand out, they'll move out of your way long before they get to you, even though the differential we're talking about is maybe 10 to 15 miles an hour max.
Mm-hmm.
It's a differential. You don't want them coming on your bumper and hitting their brakes, because then you cost them fuel as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Well, that's what's interesting if you've ever been on a long trip and you see these people, they're just flying by you, but if you're in the other lanes, then it can be a totally different thing altogether, and I can see where that can cause problems as well.
Yeah, just stay in the right lane in a ridge ride, and there's something that we use called a reverse pass, and you don't want to use this on the highway, but sometimes people just aren't waking up.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the right lane, there's a left lane open, and somebody's coming up on you. If you want left turn signal, move in the left lane, let them come on the inside, but it's not something I recommend. That's more of a suburban type technique when we're on a 4-lane going through suburbia, and you see there's gaps in traffic, but a guy's coming up on you, you can always move to the left lane, let him go by, and then you come back on the inside. That's another simple one after ridge riding. And then, of course, if they're still coming up on you a little hot, hit the emergencies to kind of wake them up out of that stupor.
Right.
And then if all else fails, after those 3 techniques fail, wide open throttle and hit the maintenance lane, and you'll avoid them. Because, again, the differential we're talking about is less than 12 miles an hour in most cases. And I've seen faster accidents in a Walmart parking lot than something like that would happen on the highway.
In fact, that's the place I worry about accidents the most, are in parking lots.
Yeah, it's not like there's a 50 mile per hour differential. Somebody would have to be going well over 100 miles an hour, and then that's just asking to be dead anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting how simple a lot of these things can be for a person to increase their mileage, incredibly so, as a matter of fact. But you're seeing that 30 miles per gallon for just about any vehicle can be an average for just about any vehicle if they just follow these steps?
Yeah, and I use the Acura MDX as a prime example, a poster child of an SUV. It's a 4-wheel drive or all-wheel drive luxury SUV, 4,500 pounds, 7 passengers. It's a big monster, has the big tires up in the air. It's, to me, it's the biggest waste. But even driving that, if you drive it for fuel economy, it's only rated at 17 miles per gallon. If you drive it for fuel economy, it's easily worth 30. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter. I've been in Chevy Tahoes, the Tahoe 2 mode that just was released earlier this year. It's only rated at 21 miles per gallon combined, but I've been over 30 in that. Again, it's capable, and that's a 6,000 pound or a 5,500 pound vehicle.
My goodness.
So even the big monster stuff, just using the basic techniques, will give you a 50 to 70% increase in fuel economy without even breathing hard. But you do have to pay attention. It's not going to come to you for free, which is unfortunately what I think most people want. But there is the opportunity to save a lot of fuel just by changing your driving habits and set up your vehicle properly. And when we're talking the basic stuff, the advanced stuff is how you get to 200 miles per gallon in a standard, vehicle that you can buy today. The Toyota Prius, I've been out on many shoots with that, and it's just worth over 100 miles per gallon in traffic. Now, people think 100 miles per gallon, this is a 4-door sedan, 3,000 pounds. People talk about it doesn't get great mileage on the highway or whatever, which is also a misnomer like crazy. Mm-hmm. That thing can be pushed to numbers that are just incredible, and here's one. Bianca Solorzano of the CBS News team, I took her out on a clinic in Manhattan for the cameras about 3 weeks ago. Her first drive out, I didn't give her any instruction or anything. She got 43 miles per gallon in a Prius, which is really good. She did really well. She did about what anybody else would. I took the car, showed her how to do some things, and then on her next trip on the same loop, she got 79.1.
Wow.
It cost her 3 minutes to change in habits with me showing her, hey, this is pretty easy to do. And this happens again and again. I took out a host for HD Discovery Channel's Green Week. I think that's going to be shown sometime this week. It was a host by the name of David Newsom. He'd never driven a Prius before, and this was in Los Angeles at the 110 junction, I believe, which is one of the worst traffic nightmares in the country. I took him out, and his first round trip of this mess, and this was just pre-rush, he hit 42 miles per gallon. I thought, that's not bad. His next round trip of that same route, he got 46. Mm-hmm. I got in the vehicle, pegged it at 99.9, which means that's probably 105, and then I put him in the vehicle. The next 2 times around, he got over 100 both times. Okay, so this stuff is available. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get 100 miles per gallon like a Prius offers, because it offers, more fuel economy to begin with. But it doesn't matter if you drive a 4-wheel drive SUV or my Ranger pickup truck. My goodness, that thing gives great fuel economy. But the way people drive it normally, they're getting 23. 23 is unacceptable. I hauled my landscape trailer and the 2 mowers to a landscape company just the other day and back. I got 29 miles per gallon. That's driving it with 5,000 pounds of stuff on it.
Wow.
It's just, and you don't play games when you're hauling 5,000 pounds of stuff in a 3,500 pound vehicle. You're just being real gentle. Mm-hmm. But it works. That's the good thing. It's not a magic elixir. It's not some add-on that you just, have to rewire your car. This is just basic driving techniques. Some are more advanced than others. But again, just using the basics, that's 50%. And if it's not money in your pocket that you're concerned with. Think about global security or global warming. If you're one of those, local smog forming emissions. There's 1,000 reasons to become a hypermiler.
Well, yeah. Again, the most common one should be the fact that it helps you save money that you can be using in other ways as well as saving the environment as well.
That's correct.
Yeah, very encouraging stuff here. Now, Wayne, do you have a website people can go to? I mean, I'm on it, so I know what it is, but go ahead and give that to people because you show all of these things that we've been talking about, and then even more as you talked about their advanced techniques that people can use to be able to even increase their mileage to up to 100 miles per gallon. What's your website?
Yeah, it's cleanmpg.com. We started it a little over 2 years ago, and it's, of course, it's pretty popular nowadays. But, again, you don't have to use every single technique available to you. It's just a buffet table. Use what you want, but definitely do something. Do not accept the EPA rating that came on your car as what you will get because that's defeatist, and you certainly have it within you to easily increase that by 50% without even blinking.
Now, in closing, there was something we haven't touched on, but we have in an indirect way, and that's talking about driving while being distracted. And you're seeing many vehicles this day and age that come equipped with all of these extras. And we're not just talking about air conditioning, but we're talking about DVD players to keep the kids entertained on long trips and on and on. So, obviously reducing your electrical output will also reduce your gas mileage. Talk about that real briefly.
Well, I'll just go back to the Ford Escape when it was studied. Can you believe this? Running your radio is worth 1/10 of a mile per gallon. You can take it right down to anything in that car. There is something worthwhile that's going to be consuming fuel. But again, you don't want to, if the radio is entertaining or traffic and information, weather, things like that, you definitely need it. But there are limits to everything, and putting a 5,000-watt stereo system in your car is not a good thing for fuel economy, let alone the distraction. And hypermilers, the good thing about it is once you get into the mindset, it's no more energy than what it takes to create a thought, which means nothing. Okay, people might say, oh, it's so hard to think about that. Well, really, how much energy goes into a thought? Not much. And with that, just changing the habits, changing the basic setup. Before you turn that key, you should have about 3 blocks of your travel already planned in your head before you turn that key. And I don't care if it starts from a parking lot at a grocery store or a mall or a movie theater or even your driveway. Place yourself 3 blocks out. Open up that control volume. Anticipate. Don't react to what's going to happen. Before you turn that key, just like a baseball player in the major leagues, he's in left field. If it's hit to the left or right, he knows he's going to throw it to second. If it's over his head, he's going to probably throw it to third to stop the guy going all the way around. He anticipates before the ball even left the pitcher's hand what he's going to do, depending on where that ball is going to be hit towards him. Okay, do that the same before you turn that key in that car, and you're going to be surprised. But overall, the best hypermilers in the world are those that walk, bike, public trans, and even taking jet airliners is more fuel efficient than driving a car across the country.
Wow.
By all means, do those 4 first. But if you are going to turn the key, hypermile, and it's going to do a lot for everybody.
Well, Wayne Gerdes, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. And go ahead again and give your website so people can go and find out all these wonderful tips of how they can change the way that they're doing things to increase the value of their gas mileage.
Sure, Daniel. That is cleanmpg.com, and you can get onto it anytime, 24/7.
Well, thank you again for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you, Daniel. Talk to you later.
You bet. And for those of you out there, as we've been talking about saving miles per gallon, perhaps you are the president of a company or you've got some people that need to go and meet people, basically for business. Well, there are 2 ways that you can meet. You can either meet over the phone or in person. Well, which one's going to save you the most money in gas? Which one are you going to get the most increased gas mileage? Obviously by phone. But now there's a better way. What you can do is use GoToMeeting to meet online. With GoToMeeting, everyone sees your computer desktop on their computer screen. So you get the best of both worlds. It's like meeting in person, but without wasting time and money traveling, which is what we definitely want to do when you see gas prices especially rising up to as much as $5 per gallon. You and your conference calls will be more effective, and the best part is you can try GoToMeeting free right now for just 30 days. For this special offer, you must visit www.gotomeeting.com/podcasts. That's gotomeeting.com/podcast for a free trial. Beyond 50 does recommend this, obviously, for the reason that you would save money and fuel. So gotomeeting.com .com/podcast is how you can find out how this works and how you can try it for free. It's one of our wonderful sponsors to help also support the environment as well. I'm Daniel Davis. We want to thank our guest for joining us today, talking to us about how we can increase our fuel economy up to as much as 100 miles per gallon in just about any vehicle with just following a few tips, as he gave you his website address. You can also find out about that on our website, especially our blog and our newsletter that go out every single Thursday night, and you can sign up and become a free subscriber. Just simply go to Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50 with a 50, and right there you can subscribe to our free newsletter where you can find out this and other wonderful information, so that way you can be in the world participating with responsibility and knowing that you're doing the right thing. I'm Daniel Davis. I want to thank the listeners for also tuning in today, and remember, live your day past halfway.